Africa is home to some of the world's richest natural resources. Sitting on a treasure trove of untapped potential, Africa has over 30% of the world's mineral reserves. No wonder Africa has been seen as the future of global supply chains.
But it's not just about the minerals. Africa's fertile land makes it the perfect place to cultivate a variety of crops, everything from cocoa, coffee and tea to cassava, maize and legumes. It's a market that feeds billions and offers huge growth potential for investors looking at the future of food security and agribusiness. By the way, my name is Hawa and I represent the western part of Africa.
And that's just the start. Africa's energy sector is rapidly evolving with abundant natural resources like solar, wind, and hydropower. The continent is positioned to become a global leader in renewable energy. Countries like South Africa, Egypt, and Kenya are already making significant strides towards energy independence and sustainability.
Don't even get me started about what makes Africa stand out. Of course, it's its people, the young, dynamic, and entrepreneurial spirit that is fueling the rise of technology and innovation. We are seeing incredible growth in sectors like fintech, e-commerce, and mobile technology. The continent's digital transformation is creating new opportunities for businesses and investors, and the pace is only accelerating.
Discussing trends, challenges, and opportunities available in Africa is what we discuss on Invest Africa Podcast.
Invest Africa Podcast. So whether you are a seasoned investor or someone looking to explore the emerging markets, the Invest Africa podcast is here to help you navigate this exciting landscape. Join us as we take you on a journey through Africa's abundant resources, thriving industries, and the game-changing investments that are shaping the future of the continent.
The Invest Africa podcast, shaping Africa's investment landscape. Hello everyone, welcome back to another deep dive session of the Invest Africa Group podcast. I am Mubarak Abimbola, and as always, it's an honor to sit behind this mic. I say it's an honor because every time we gather here, we're not just exchanging facts, we're piecing together Africa's living story. Because each episode, we dig beneath the headlines to find the human pulse of the numbers, okay? And today, the story is going to take us across oceans and airports, through border control desk, and into living rooms scattered from Houston to Accra, from Dubai to Addis Ababa. Because the topic before us, diaspora dollar, how migration patterns shape Africa's economic future, isn't just about cash transfers. It is about identity and what it means to build an economy out of longing. As usual, I have in the studio my co-host, Hawa Adegbite. Hello, Hawa.
Hi, Mubarak, and hello to our dear listeners. Back whenever we speak about migration, the spotlight often shines on those living on the departure gate, right? The packed suitcases or the emotional farewell. But today, like Mubarak has said, we are asking a different question, right? What actually follows these people home, basically? What happens to that connection once miles stretch between family members, right? We're asking those kind of questions today because every remittance, every PayPal ping, every small business funded from abroad carries the echo of that question. What actually follows them home?
Exactly, Yawa. And in 2025, the landscape is shifting faster than ever because we're seeing visa policies, labor shortages, and political pressures across the US, the UK, France, and even the Gulf are rewriting how Africans move, how Africans work, how they send money. So, the flows of the diaspora dollar, who sends it? How often and through which corridors are being reshaped by global events in real time?
So for everyone tuned in, from Lagos to London, from Kigali to Kuwait, this episode is for you, right? We are unpacking the new economies of migration, the policy turns abroad, the ripple effects back home, and the ways ordinary Africans are inventing and reinventing what it means to support, invest, and believe in their continent from thousands of miles away. So we want to hear from you like always. If you've not listened to our previous episode, you can click the pause button on this one and go back to check on other things we've talked about and join in on the conversation today. Use the hashtag Invest Africa Group Podcast on any platform you're listening from.
All right, let's begin with the big picture. The World Bank's Migration and Development Brief of 2025 shows that Sub-Saharan Africa received roughly $54 billion in remittances last year, a historic high. By mid-2025, projections started flattening. The global climate shifted. Immigration reforms in major economies slowed labor mobility. Inflation eroded disposable income, and fintech regulation tightened digital money flows. In the United States, we saw new employment integrity rules, which was introduced under the 2025 Immigration Reform Act, that requires quarterly re-verification for foreign healthcare and service sector workers. Thousands of Nigerians and Ethiopians have been forced into temporary suspension of works permit, directly affecting how much and how frequently they can send home. Now, many of these issues form the basis of what we'll be discussing on the show today.
And Mubarak, even across the Atlantic, right, the United Kingdom's skilled worker threshold update policy raised minimum salary benchmarks by nearly 30%. For many Ghanaians, Kenyans, and Nigerian professionals on Tier 2 visas, that single change meant the difference between renewal and repatriation. Add to that the shrinking post-study visa window, and you've got a generation of African graduates suddenly facing an uncertain future. Now, what's even more striking is how this policy ripple extends beyond individual careers, right? It disrupts entire family trajectories and remittance flows that, sustain communities back home. Parents who once celebrated their children's overseas, they now grapple with the reality that global mobility is becoming a privilege, not a promise.
And apart from the US and the UK, France also added another layer. The 2025 Immigration Control Bill, passed in April, also broadened the scope of deportations for undocumented workers. For West Africans in Marseille or Paris, especially Senegalese street vendors and delivery riders, that policy hit so hard. Many found themselves on the first flight home, often without savings or safety net.
And looking at the Gulf, right, Saudi Arabia's Saudization Drive 2.0 and the UAE's National Labour Priority Plan replaced thousands of African domestic and construction workers, right, with locals or South Asian short-term recruits. For Ethiopians and Sudanese families who relied on these remittances, entire household budgets collapsed within months.
So what does that mean for the money trail, you might ask? The US-Nigeria corridor still dominates at around $20 billion annually. But, the UK-Ghana channel dropped by roughly 6% in first quarter of 2025. France-Senegal fell nearly by 5%, while Gulf Ethiopia flow swung violently as repatriation surged. These aren't just, economic numbers. They represent postponed school fees, unfinished buildings, and delayed medical treatment. In fact, they represent delayed dreams.
Oh, it's sobering actually, and yet there's resilience woven into this data we're talking about. Africans abroad are finding new paths, some through fintech platforms like Remitly, Cheaper Cash, and Lemfi, others through community co-ops pulling funds for bigger projects back home. The story of migration has always been one of adaptation, and 2025 is no different. Even as borders continue to tighten, innovation still shows up in a lot of stories across the continent, from digital entrepreneurship to remote consultancy. Many people are redefining what it means to go abroad. It's no more just by crossing oceans anymore, but by creating opportunities that transcend them.
So let's humanize all these numbers we've mentioned. So I'm talking about humanizing those statistics, okay? Take Kehinde Adebayo, for example, a Nigerian nurse in Texas. I mean, she has been abroad for a decade, sending part of every paycheck to Ibadan. Yeah. In her words, whenever she has opportunity to talk to family members, she would say that she does not just wire the money, she's wiring care. And it struck me that remittances from US, UK, France, Europe, the Gulf, it's not just about the money, it's about what it represents. Okay? But this year, under the US Financial Transparency Act of 2025, every international transfer above $400 now faces additional reporting and bank fees. For Kehinde, that's just like a 12% cost increase on the same salary. Over a year, that's almost $1,200 lost to compliance bureaucracy. Money that could have gone into a family's clinic.
Stories like Kehinde's, reveal a quiet emotional tax on migration, right? It's almost like, the feeling of being punished for caring too much. Imagine waking up every morning, torn between building a life where you are and sustaining the one you left behind, right? Stories like this just push that narrative. Then there's Amma. Amma is in London, a data analyst turned accidental entrepreneur. After her visa renewal was denied earlier this year, she took a £15,000 savings and flew back to Accra. Within months, she co-founded an edtech platform bringing coding lessons to Ghanaian teens, right? I once saw one of our interviews on Ghana TV where she said, and I quote, that if the UK closes one door, Ghana opens another, right? She mentioned that she's still investing just closer to home.
That shift from remittance to reinvestment is very powerful, I must tell you. Amma stopped being a sender and became a builder. Our story mirrors a larger pattern. Migrants who return, not by choice, but by circumstance, yet convert frustration into innovation. Across the continent, there's a similar story to that, and that would be that of Ibrahima Diop in Dakar. After his deportation from Marseille in February, he used his leftover savings to start a cassava processing outfit where he employed 6 people. In one of his interviews with Le Monde Afrique, he mentioned, and I quote, "They sent me home without plan, but I had to make one for myself. The remittances stopped, but I am now the remittances." The way he said it, he said it with jokes, right? But you would realize that statement carries pain, but he has been able to convert that pain into something meaningful.
What a profound line, right? That line captures a whole generation's transformation from dependent to drivers of local economies, yet it also reveals a painful truth, right? Behind those success stories lies thousands more who return without networks or capital. People who struggle quietly to reintegrate. For every celebrated tech founder or diaspora investor, there's another young graduate back home, recalibrating dreams, trying to translate foreign experiences into local relevance. It's a quieter migration, the journey back into belonging and survival.
Exactly, our for every Ama or Ibrahima, there's someone whose dream dissolve at the customs border. And that's the duality of the diaspora dollar hour. It's ironical because it's both a lifeline and also a limitation. So when global system trembles, I can tell you, the dollar shakes too.
Absolutely. But when you look at it, right, there's still that will to give back, right? That will just refuses to die. Even in the midst of policy shocks, Africans abroad raised millions, millions through diaspora crowdfunding, for hospitals in places like Sierra Leone, flood reliefs in Nigeria and drought response in Kenya. They even raised money for, a lot of advocacy causes and, the like. So while individual remittances may dip, collective impact keeps rising.
You're right, and it is worth noting how technology is reshaping this generosity. In 2025 alone, more than 40% of African remittance transactions move through digital wallets. Gone are the days where you have to wait for someone coming, or you have to go through Western Union, MoneyGram. All these fintech apps have made it easier to send from the comfort of their homes. And that means less dependency on banks, more peer-to-peer trust. Yet, even that shift is not free, okay? There's definitely a payment on the transfer being sent home, and all of that. There's transaction fees in some digital corridor, and this transaction fee over around about 3 to 7%, which is far above the UN target of 3% globally.
And those transaction fees actually matter, right? Because when a single mother in Lagos receives 90,000 instead of 97,000 or 95,000, that's missing a whole 7,000, right? It could have been a child's school transport fee, right? These aren't just numbers if we look at it. They are choices deferred, meals skipped, and futures delayed, at an accumulated stance. And when you scale those micro losses across millions of transactions each month, you begin to see a silent drain, right? You begin to see billions slipping away through the cracks of Africa's digital economy.
That's true. That's why we say the diaspora dollar is more than money. It's a measure of trust, policy, and possibility. The flows themselves are emotional currencies.
So guys, as we move on, keep this image in mind. Families refreshing mobile money apps at midnight, waiting for a notification sound that means rent has been paid, medicine is going to be bought, or a dream is still alive. Behind every transaction ID, there is hope coded in data.
Moving on, let's talk about the economic ripples and policy shift, okay? Whenever we talk about remittances, we often stop at the household level, that is the school fees, the rent, healthcare. But the larger economic currents, those payment create are enormous, yeah? According to the IMF's Africa Outlook report that was released in July 2025, remittances now account for nearly 4% of sub-Saharan Africa's GDP. And that's more than foreign direct investment in several countries combined, yeah? More than the FDI in several countries combined. Yet, that figures hide turbulence underneath. Because once migration slows, the old local economies begin to breathe differently. In places like Lagos, Kumasi, and Addis Ababa, real estate demand fell by nearly 10% this year, as returning diaspora families postponed building projects. What that translates to is that cement sales paused, labor hours, transport miles, all shrinking in a ripple that that started thousands of kilometers away.
And what's striking is how uneven the pattern is. In the Horn of Africa, Ethiopia and Sudan actually saw spikes in informal inflows this year. We're talking about cash literally hand-carried home by repatriated workers from the Gulf. Meanwhile, West Africa's digital corridors, are tightening under new anti-money laundering laws, making it harder for small transfer operators to stay compliant. The system just continues to squeeze one end of the pipe and bulges somewhere else. It's a constant dance between regulation and reality, between the need for oversight and the necessity of survival.
I mean, that's just like the summary of everything we've been discussing. It's just ironical. What's happening in one end of Africa is not the same thing on the other end of Africa. And government are scrambling to respond to all of these issues. Nigeria's central bank diaspora bond program aims to channel up to $1 billion a month through formal banking routes. Ghana's Ministry of Finance has also said it return and rebuild fund offering tax incentives for diaspora investors who reinvest remittance capital locally. Kenya is also experimenting with diaspora investment insurance, while Rwanda's digital Remit Trust guarantees faster settlement within 24 hours. What this means is that governments are trying to make sure that they can tap into it officially, that it has to pass through the government route. But it has always been through families to family, children to parents, parents to children, friends to friends. Government are trying to tap into these remittances.
And it's also a sign that, the government is also recognizing that remittances are a charity, right? They are infrastructure. So it's obvious that if you're able to secure those flows, you'll be able to stabilize currencies, balance reserves, and foreign entrepreneurship. They are the quiet arteries of many African economies, circulating resilience where institutions continue to falter. And when confidence in those systems wavers, it's not just households that feel the tremor anymore. Exchange rate policies, consumer sentiment, and even government spending begin to wobble.
And just in case you find it difficult to understand why it is important for government to tap into the remittances, let me take Nigeria as an example again. The naira's volatility has been a topic of conversation for a while now. Purchasing power of dollar to naira has tripled than it did in 5 years, or that it did 5 years ago. But that benefit evaporates if the system leaks. I mean, if the government does not make sure that the naira is stable, and how can they stabilize naira? It's when there is more remittances coming, more FDI. The money are coming through the official route. They have enough dollar to exchange to pay international companies, IOMs, organizations that are partnering with Nigeria. They have enough money to pay them. Instead of trying to stabilize the naira or trying to pump money to make sure the naira can stand on its own, all these are very important for the government. That's why you can see the government doing everything possible. So every delayed transfer or parallel market diversion undercuts that advantage for them. So the new frontier of competition is not who can send the money, it is who can guarantee value preservation.
And let's not forget that there is a psychological side to all of this. A London-based Ghanaian was telling, in a report I saw, he told the Guardian Africa this summer that whenever he sends money and it lands just 2 days late or half short, it's not just a financial loss to him, it's emotional disappointment. And that kind of erosion of trust runs deep. It begins to go away from the transaction now. It all borders down on connection and reliability. So each failed transfer chips away at the invisible bond between migrant and home. That's what fintechs and government alike are now racing to repair.
And here is where it gets interesting, yeah? The diaspora dollar is evolving from a lifeline to a lever. I mean, instead of only wiring consumption support, African abroads are pulling funds for productive investment. We're seeing real estate cooperatives, we're seeing venture capital circles, as well as education trust all across the globe. In fact, in 2025, diaspora-backed startup funding exceeded $5.8 billion. I mean, that's almost a fifth of all VC capital raised on the continent. The largest chunk came from Nigerians in the US, as well as that of Ghanaians in the UK. So we are seeing them investing back home through regulated angel networks. We're seeing all of them coming together to send money home, to invest, to even partner with governments beyond what it used to be before.
Absolutely. And the motivations are changing. It's like many people are saying, if I can't return permanently, let me at least, send money home, let my money return for me. And real estate remains the most visible channel. Projects in Lekki in Nigeria, East Legon in Ghana, and Kigali districts are dominated by diaspora cooperatives. But there's a quieter evolution unfolding too. The funding of private schools, telemedicine clinics, and renewable energy microgrids. These are showing bold investments, right? And they show that these investments are rooted. They are an attempt to build from afar the futures that they once left to find out there.
A Lagos-based housing analyst told Business Day recently that for every 10 apartments sold in new development, 4 are financed directly by diaspora remittances. Well, just in case you've not listened to one of our episodes on real estate, you can go check that out and you'd be able to connect to the conversation, right? Yeah, we are seeing diasporans sending money home to invest in real estate. Real estate is like their go-to thing to invest right now. And this solidified this particular statement I read from that Lagos housing analyst who told Business Day that if you see any 10 new properties being sold, you can bet that 4 out of that 10 belongs to diasporans. And because these investors are emotionally attached, they tend to over-invest in quality because they already have experience. They've seen another world. That's why you see solar panels being stocked up on the roof. They have fiber optic internet, community parks. They create mini models of what they used to see, what African cities could be like, what the African city looks like in their own domain. They create a replica here. And if governors can match their ambition, it will be easy for them to come on board. Right before the government introduce or come in, they're already replicating the lifestyle they have where they are currently living. So you would realize that these people are so connected home that we used to think. Money they send goes beyond just taking care of people they care about. It's also about finding a connection for themselves.
That's such a key point, Mbak. The diaspora often functions like a parallel development agency, right? More efficient, more targeted, and like you said, far more personal because there's a catch, right? Most of that capital still moves through informal channels. Money is routed via family intermediaries, trusted friends, or unregistered agents. These flows rarely touch the formal banking systems. If countries could now capture and formalize even half of that energy, they wouldn't just boost tax revenue, they would unlock vast pool of credit, of investment data, and financial inclusion potential waiting beneath the surface.
And beyond formalization lies the storytelling, Awa. The way nation markets trust the citizens abroad. Rwanda's consistent policy messaging, for instance, has turned emotional confidence into tangible capital for them. You see how it is difficult. I really don't want to put Nigeria on the spotlight right now, but you realize that so many responses or so many narration people abroad hear about Nigeria sometimes make it difficult for them to go all out for their people here, because if government cannot market their trust, if they can't tell the story positively, nobody would be confident in sending back tangible amounts of money. For instance, let me use Kenya's Diaspora Innovation Fund. The way they've been able to, turn emotional confidence into tangible capital needs to be studied. The same goes by matching diaspora seed money with local grant. These are signals that says that your contribution is not a favor, it's part of our growth architecture. And just like human nature, we are naturally invested where we are needed, where we feel like we are valued. And that's what countries should push for to tell their stories better.
Absolutely. But not everyone gets it right. In some places, bureaucracy still drives people away. I remember a friend of mine in Paris that tried to register a small logistic business in Senegal. after returning, and the paperwork alone took over 9 months. By the time the license came through, our capital had already evaporated, and it's a familiar heartbreak. Good intentions stranded in administrative limbo. When policy doesn't match purpose, even patriotism runs out of patience, right?
That gap between will and system, is the central drama of the diaspora dollar. Let me give you an illustration. We all can confirm that the money exists. Africans abroad have desires to send money back home. Yet, the bridge remains shaky. That's why we keep saying that Africa's most valuable export is not oil or cocoa. It is confidence. It is confidence. African government needs to build that, and everything else will follow. You need to build confidence for investors. You need to assure investors their investment are safe, that expatriates are safe in the country, that everything they bring in, they will get multiple folds. And that's the summary of what is happening with the diaspora dollar. People are scared. The gap and the system is not just matching. Okay, the money exists, the desire exists, but the confidence is lacking, and it's quite unfortunate.
Okay, yeah, the confidence is lacking, but it's still obvious, like it's still there, because behind every transaction is a confidence and a belief that home can work. Each time a migrant chooses to send money through official channels instead of giving up, that's a quiet vote of faith or confidence in governance. And that faith, even though it's fragile, right, it seems to be enduring, and it can be seen as the seed of transformation. Only if policies can honor that trust and confidence, right, then remittances will become more than transfer, but, testimonies of how the countries can work. It will become a living dialogue between hope and homeland.
So in essence, the story of the diaspora dollar is that at its heart, it is teaching our Africans to learn how to trust itself again. Okay? One remittance, one return, one reinvestment at a time. I mean, beyond all the numbers, beyond all the sketchy details, beyond the bureaucracy, what the diaspora dollar would teach us is that we need to build confidence. We need to gain the trust of Africans abroad. We need to make sure that one remittance at a time, one return, one reinvestment can shape the continent as a whole. Well, we spent a few minutes tracing the emotional and economic fingerprint of the diaspora dollar. But here's a question that still lingers. How do we make this flow sustainable? Because we've been talking about trust, we've been talking about what is lacking, we've been talking about how Africans feel connected to be back home, whether through sending finances home or through coming back themselves. But we've not talked about how to make these remittances flow sustainable. And one thing I've noticed with government across the continent is that they love numbers. The billions in annual inflows, the cushion it gives to foreign reserves, but few ask whether the system protects the people behind those transfers. Too often, the diaspora relationship is treated like an ATM, not a partnership. I mean, just take your card and withdraw money. That's the relationship the African diaspora has with the government, as with the people. In fact, you must have come across so many podcasts, so many tweets of people talking about black tax. Well, that's what the diaspora dollar seems like to those that are sending it, and it feels like an ATM to those that are withdrawing from it.
That's so true. We can't keep celebrating remittance volumes while ignoring the strain beneath them. I remember reading a 2025 policy note from the African Development Bank that said for every $100 sent home, an average of $12 is lost to inefficiency and delay. Think about that. $12 slipping away in fees, bureaucracy, and even broken systems. Now multiply that across the $56 billion that keeps coming into Africa from the diaspora, and you begin to see the quiet hemorrhage of hope. That's not a margin of error, right? It's a continental emergency. Reform isn't just a policy choice anymore at this point. It's a survival strategy for the economies that depend, on the fragile hope of return.
Exactly. One path forward is what economists call returning investment framework. Okay. We are still talking about how to make sure that the flow becomes sustainable. And African government needs to learn the returning investment framework. Yeah. We need to ensure that the system help returning migrants reinvest smoothly. They allow for quick business registration. They give room for credit access, tax holidays, and diaspora insurance. A typical example of returning investment framework is what Kenya is currently doing with their pilot version, which has already helped about 200 returnees launch SMEs in manufacturing and tech. Other countries need to replicate these, need to copy these, and this would give diasporans the confidence that, that their country also care about them, care about their investment, and care about their retirement.
Interestingly, Ethiopia is doing something similar with its Home Start program. They are offering 2-year tax breaks for diaspora-led housing projects and partial risk guarantees for bank loans. Right? It's not yet perfect, right? Bureaucracy still locks in the fine print of, some of these programs, but at least it's a promising shift. For once, government are starting to view the diaspora as not senders of money alone, but as stakeholders in development. And it just shows, a subtle but powerful reframing, from remittances to reinvestment now.
Well, and for the Nigerian government, I think the diaspora SME insurance scheme, though still in a pilot phase, might be one of the most underrated innovations I've seen this year. I mean, what it does is that it de-risks small diaspora ventures by covering up to 40% of potential losses from exchange rate shocks or partner default. I mean, if implemented well, I use the condition there. If implemented well, that's a safety net that can transform how confidently people invest from abroad.
That's right. Because ultimately, money follows trust, and trust follows predictability. When migrants believe their remittances will be protected, that rules won't change midstream, the flow becomes generational, and that's when remittances shift from crisis aid to structural investments.
And then there's technology, okay? That's another way to ensure that we make the diaspora dollar sustainable. The invisible engine of transformation, technology has been at the crux of every of our progress as a continent. Yeah, we are seeing blockchain-based transfers, we're seeing diaspora bonds, we are seeing mobile applications, AI-powered credit scoring for returnees. I mean, all of these sound futuristic, but they're already happening. Fintech companies are designing platforms where an investor in Atlanta can directly fund a maize farm somewhere in Ogbomoso or a cashew farm in Ogbomoso and sponsor a maize farm in Oyo Town or a rice farm in Kebbi. I mean, all these while being transparent, real-time, and show yield report. It is showing that if we include technology in our planning, we can also ensure that the diaspora dollar becomes sustainable.
Absolutely. I mean, it's beautiful to imagine, right? An ecosystem where every dollar can be traced from sender to impact, right? Where transparency is not just a slogan that the government throws around, but actually a standard. An ecosystem where data becomes trust and trust becomes goods. That's the Africa many in the diaspora dream of.
All right, listeners, as always, before we wrap up the conversation, trust us to always bring you training investment stories, what you need to know, how these affect you, where you can invest, where you can put your money. And this week we'll be checking Africa's economic map, the outlook, the numbers, and of course, what is trending across the continent.
Exactly. Because Africa never sleeps, and neither does the money. So let's take a look at what's making the headlines right now. Mubarak, do you want to start?
All right, first, Nigeria sells about $2.25 billion euro bond as market largely shrugged off threat from US President Donald Trump of potential military action in the country. Well, just in case you're not aware, there's been a statement from the portals about alleged Christian genocide. The portals threatening to, strike Nigeria if the Nigerian government does not work on the persecution of Christians in the country. And, a lot of that particular statement from the US president affected the stock market, affected the market a lot. But it's quite surprising that the Nigerian market was able to recover quickly and was able to sell about 2.25 billion euro bonds. And, the sale reflects a sharp improvement in global borrowing condition that is tempting some of the world's riskiest sovereigns back to international bond market, with Congo Republic, Angola, and Kenya also selling their IE debt to eager investors. Okay.
Yeah, second on our list, this is coming from the Gulf, the United Arab Emirates Africa Tourism Investment Summit opened in Dubai. In the month of October, according to the Times of India, the UAE aims to channel over $5 billion into joint hospitality and infrastructure projects across Africa within the next 5 years. But beyond the numbers, right, the symbolism is striking. For decades, Gulf capital flowed outward through oil and construction. Now it's cycling back towards Africa's coastline, heritage sites, and creative economies. From the Red Sea resort of Djibouti to ecologies in Rwanda and Ghana's cultural corridors, the investment narrative is shifting. And analysts are calling it the next frontier of soft power economies. While skeptics warn of neo-dependency, others see partnership potential. Either way, the message is clear, right? From Dubai, Africa is no longer just a destination, it's a decisive player in reimagining global tourism itself.
Next on our list is Kenya, which has kept its e-mobility momentum. EcoTrack, a Nairobi-based startup, secured $60 million in Series B funding, and it is backed by the African Development Bank's Green Energy Fund. It's the largest renewable transport deal in East Africa this quarter. And, this could cut urban emissions by nearly 20% over the next decade.
Okay, so moving on, the France-Senegal FinTech partnership, Remit Afrique and Societe Generale Dakar have unveiled a new remittance-linked savings platform that allows migrants in Europe to invest directly in local bonds and treasury bills. It's been described as Remittance 2.0. And this platform bridges two worlds that have long operated in isolation: diaspora remittances and domestic capital markets. For Senegalese workers in Paris or Marseille, it means their transfers can now build schools, roads, or renewable projects, not just sustain households. For the government, on the other hand, it's a quiet revolution in financial inclusion. It helps in expanding investment literacy and anchoring local economies in diaspora confidence. If this model is successful, right, it could ripple across the continent. It could help to redefine the meaning of remittance from mere support to share stakeholding.
And finally, the Ethiopia Gulf Labour Accord. That's a bilateral deal that was signed with the UAE last week, which introduces stronger wage repatriation rights and safer labor migration frameworks for Ethiopian workers. You don't know how beautiful this is. That means that Ethiopians that are working in the Gulf, they get to get stronger wage repatriation. A larger percentage of their money can always be sent to Ethiopia without worries. And, the migration framework is just going to the SWIFT, and they would not need to start crossing or going through illegal route before they can migrate to the Gulf areas. And the ILO called this particular deal a model for immune mobility. Yes, it's a model for immune mobility. It's a proof that reform, even in the labor corridors long criticized, is possible.
Okay, so that's it on the trending investment news we have on this segment, or on this episode rather. Each of these updates connects back to our team basically. They remind us that Africa's economic transformation isn't something in the far-fetched distance. It's unfolding in real time, right? It's unfolding in boardrooms, in policy chambers, even in startups and summits, and in the quiet determination of Africans both home and abroad.
Before we wrap up, let's take a moment to pause. Yeah, beneath all the data that we've rolled out today and the policy, I noticed that there's something more intimate, something more personal about migration. And what's that thing? I got to learn about this intimacy of Africans when I spoke to a friend who lives in Ochawa. And he said something that struck me. He said, every remittance, every money I send back home is like a prayer. Yeah. I send it hoping that it lands safely, hoping that it helps, hoping that, it proves that he has not forgotten his people. And I just wonder, if at this point I'm sending money to you, you had better appreciate it too. Don't be being bothered that does really solve the problem you need. Okay, because, I just don't know. It feels like Africans cannot forget their roots, okay? And that sentiment mirror thousands of others. My friend's sentiment about, praying that the money lands safely, that it can, do what they need it to do, and it shows that they've not forgotten their roots. It's a sentiment that so many people mirror. Migration is not just economics, yeah. It is emotional architecture. It builds invisible bridges between continents, families, and dreams.
I feel you back. I feel that, what you're saying now reminds me of something that my cousin said. So my cousin's family are actually well-to-do. Right, they don't need the money that she sends. No one actually demands money from her. But she actually said what you just explained now. She said it keeps her connected. She was talking to me some time ago. She was like, she just stopped sending money, it would be as if she has vanished away in the UK. And that's like the paradox if you look at it. Remittances keep distance alive, but also bear the cost of distance. It's a proof of love, right? But it also shows that, yeah, I'm separated, I'm quite far from you, but I still love you.
That your cousin does not need another family member. Yeah. Since the family does not need the money, your cousin might start a family with me. If the family does not need the money, I need the money. This is just a joke.
But you need to send in an application, right?
I should send an application to become a family member.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. That's not a problem. Well, the essence of our cousin and that of my friend is to tell you that when migration policy tightens, it's not just an administrative issue. It's an emotional earthquake. Deportation don't just cut off money, they cut off belongings. So government, parastatals abroad, consider all of this when making decisions. So many narratives would want to force you to tighten migration laws, but you need to look at it from the deeper perspective. What damage are you causing? What problem are you solving? Weigh the options. Does the damage outweigh the solution? Then you would have your answer.
Despite all of this, like you said, these administrative issues and tight policies, people still find ways to adapt. Like they open digital side hustles, they co-invest in local cooperatives. I thought people actually crowdfund, for local advocacy efforts and stuff like that. Or they even share tweets or podcasts to, share knowledge and bridge the gap. That's the energy of Africans. That's the energy of diaspora. It's always relentless.
That resilience is our richest resource. Somebody once abused Nigerians that we do not get tired. I don't know if I should call that a compliment or an insult, but relentless is our richest resource, because Africa's story has never been about scarcity. It has always been about adaptation. The diaspora dollar is a proof that even when people leave, their arts never fully do. I feel all of you that are out there. I feel your pain. I feel the days when you feel so lonely, when you just wish you could be with your family, but you can't just wake up all the way from London and say you want to come back to Abuja. The cost of the flight, I understand what it means. So this is me saying a big shout out to all of you.
I'm also sending my love, in addition to the one Barak has sent. Because when you think about it, right, the diaspora dollar is both a mirror and a magnifier, right? It reflects our realities. It shows the inequalities, the dreams, the policy, the stories that, remain untold. And it magnifies them across borders, across oceans. It shows us how interconnected our fates truly are.
Absolutely. And it reminds us the development does not only happen in ministries or boardrooms, it happens in living rooms as well. It happens on our mobile screen. In the quiet moments when someone abroad decides to send a little money than they can afford, not for profit, but just for purpose.
And, perhaps the real future of diaspora dollar lies not just in how we send, but how wisely we channel it. Because if each remittance could plant a seed in sectors like education or for innovation or maybe for sustainability, Africa's growth will be unstoppable. And it's a good reminder for anyone listening, whether in Nigeria or abroad. For those in Nigeria, tell those abroad. For those abroad, know that your remittance is not just money. It's a movement. It's a momentum. Every transaction you make is a quiet revolution that Africa needs.
Awa, the more we talk about remittances, the clearer it becomes that they are not just wires of money. They are wires of memory. Every transfer, every business started, every tuition paid is a reminder that borders can't block belonging. And maybe the challenge ahead isn't simply keeping the dollars flowing. It is ensuring that the dignity behind those dollars is protected. When a nurse in Houston or a driver in Doha sends money home, the transaction carries the weight of love, responsibility, and belief. Okay? Government, banks, and even we as media voices owe it to them, to make that process transparent, affordable, and fair.
So guys, we always try to see how investors can actually tap into these opportunities. If you've been listening to us, the biggest opportunity I see here is for you to, create or co-create channels for easy transfer of, these fees without putting too much on task and all of that, to make it seamless for people abroad to send money home. Right. I think that if you think of such innovations like what is happening in Kigali, things like that, I think investors can tap into that, and it's going to be a viable investment pathway for you. So I guess we've come to the end of today's episode. Right. To those of us listening from, Accra, from Dubai, Paris, Atlanta, or anywhere this story or anywhere your movement, your path has taken you, remember that every remittance, every investment, every bit of confidence you place in home had another brick to Africa's future. And to those listening on the continent, may we build the kind of systems, may we build the kind of transparency and trust that makes those investments worth it. Because, like we said, the diaspora dollar is only as strong as the homeland that receives it.
Okay, guys, I would have to say, stay hopeful, stay informed, and keep believing that your contribution, no matter how small, carries the power to transform. And remember, we are all part of this global conversation, shaping one story, Africa's rise, one remittance, one return, one dream at a time. Keep engaging us on all social media. by using the hashtag Invest Africa Group Podcast, and we'll take the conversation further. Until next time, keep investing not just in market, but in meaning. This has been the Invest Africa Group Podcast. Stay inspired, stay informed, and stay invested in Africa. Bye-bye.